Part 2.
3, 2,
2. Because, yeah, we just watched Part 2. The Age of Heroes, which is absolutely my favorite title. The Age of Heroes. You know what I mean? Like, that in itself could be a fucking movie title. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
But this part, start with Aquaman. A brief highlight once more of the score from Tom Holkenborg is I love Zack Snyder is a master at the character introduction. You know what I mean?
Right.
The way the first time you see Batman and Batman versus Superman. I mean, not Bruce Wayne, but like when he's like going through the walls and he's up there. You know what I mean? In the same way, like when you see Aquaman saving someone. You know what I mean? Where you're focused on the ship, and then it pans up, and this is where the score comes in. It's very like you get the emotion that you would get from like a sailor's point of view. You know what I mean?
Right.
That rising, almost savior. You know what I mean? With a light undertone of like royalty. You know what I mean? As we get into the that constant fighting of his fate. You know what I mean?
I think in terms of this, the way the scene plays out, it's there's a lot of like little details that I really appreciate. One thing that we've noted before is it seems like Aquaman, as he jumps into the water every time, he always like removes his shirt. Most likely because it's just a hindrance, right?
Yeah, the swish, swish, swish.
But when he comes to save this guy, he's still wearing his shirt, which probably implies that like he was just relaxing or doing whatever he was doing, and then he heard about this guy who was stuck out there.
Yeah.
And with like almost without a beat, he just hops into the water and boom, he's out there.
Yeah.
And it's like you have that, and then you juxtapose that with the way that he like picks up this sailor and then tosses him on a table. It's almost like he doesn't give a shit. But the visuals inform you that he actually does. He just doesn't like sugarcoat you. He doesn't like play nice. But he cares.
He cares so much that he's angry that he put himself in that position. You know what I mean? He throws him onto the table just like, it's almost like a parent when a kid runs into a street. You know what I mean? Like, the fuck were you doing? You weren't respecting the street. You know what I mean? But more with not just the score, but the music choice when he's walking down the dock.
Right.
The lyrics, much like they said our gods would outlive us, but they lied. There is a kingdom, the starry heavens above, and where songs are written typically about like the ethereal nature of like heavens and the stars above. This also works very well if you look at the ocean, which the way the camera is framed as he's walking down and the music is playing is that of the ocean, right? And as we see, the ocean is vast, and even if you look at from like Aquaman, it almost is of like starry heavens. You know what I mean?
In particular, I love how this song kind of like gives us a little bit of an indication into who Aquaman is. Like, he is the rightful king, but like, and we hold on this emphasis of his face as he stares off into the water, and the water like comes in and crushes him, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like this pressure, this like he's constantly drawn to the sea because that's where he truly belongs. But the pressure of that is overbearing. It comes in on him,
but not entirely to the sea. I mean, the beauty of Aquaman is that of belonging to the sea and the land, and bringing these two, places that hate each other so much. You know what I mean? It's that bridge between two people that we get from Clark. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And just to finish off the song choice that Zack Snyder made, the lyrics, "He is without, he is within." It really reflects just how alone he is, and everything is inward. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he is everything. He is all he has. You know what I mean?
For sure.
As he goes from place to place.
And one thing that to kind of add to that about the whole like Aquaman dilemma is that like in this film we're going to see him kind of like come to terms with his connection to humanity. But I think it's really powerful to see him kind of like he struggles, like he is of both worlds and neither at the same time
Yeah.
in this film, right? He's going to connect with humanity, but there's still another entire half of himself that he hasn't yet.
Yeah, he's going from place to place on land, and he goes to that place under the water. A great visual foreshadowing of him in Atlan. You know what I mean? And it's because that monument to Atlan is outside of Atlantis. You know what I mean? It is as distant as he can be from Atlantis while still being connected to his mother. Because that's the thing about Aquaman, and you really see it in the scene between him and Volko, is while he projects a lot of like hate and like disdain for, the savages of Atlantis. You know what I mean? And he it's a lot of projection. You know what I mean? He's very hurt that he lost his mother. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And his mother through his perspective abandoned him. You know what I mean?
And I love Volko coming here and giving him his mother's trident.
Yeah.
I think there's the fact that he uses that as a weapon in this film is like really meaningful, you know?
Yeah.
It's his last connection to a person that he lost.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where we're talking about like the interconnectivity of like the Marvel movies versus the DC. Something that Joss Whedon robbed us from like the theatrical cut is that connection, because now when you're going into Aquaman, and he's using that trident, you have all this connection of why that is so important. So the moment it breaks, and you see it on Jason Momoa's face in Aquaman, when that trident breaks, it's his mother's, and and through this movie you see the experience of him and that trident. So when it breaks in Aquaman, that's that universe really, tying itself together and strengthening all elements. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
And when it comes to Volko, William Dafoe, right? Just, I really feel like he hammers it home, and we'll see more of it later. But that responsibility, you know what I mean? Like, your mother is gone, but if she was here and Steppenwolf came, it would have been her responsibility.
Yeah.
And it is now yours. And I think it's by this time that we see Aquaman, and we see Lois, and we even see Cyborg. We really see the theme of people who have experienced great trauma, shutting themselves off, right? Lois, Aquaman, and Cyborg are capable of great, great things, right? Lois Lane, the bringer of truth that is journalism. You know what I mean? Aquaman can literally save across, like, the oceans. You know what I mean? And he could stop the conflict between land and sea, but he's shutting himself off from that. He's willing to, like, in some terms, it's like allowing someone as evil as Orm to come to power because you want to shut yourself off. You know what I mean? All the things that are covered up and not brought to light through journalism that Lois is allowing to happen by shutting herself off.
Right.
Cyborg, the people that he could help with his new abilities that he's not by shutting himself off. That is a huge theme in this movie, and Volko punctuates that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think another important element to that to highlight is that Aquaman still struggles with this there is a whole world out there that he basically rejects full heart or full stop, and the reality of it is that, like, while we get to, from Volko's perspective, we get to see that, like, the reason that they're unable to bring like a proper defense to the mother box is because they're currently in a struggle internally, right?
Yeah.
The people are suffering. Orm is like...
Orm wants to take all resources and build an armada to take the land. And he's not going to protect some box. You know what I mean? And because of that, because Aquaman has shut himself off, he could have prevented that if he was already ruling Atlantis. You know what I mean? So that is why, that trident is that call to action that he has to take. You know what I mean?
For sure.
But to get to Steppenwolf, which started this part, but it's really best to talk about Steppenwolf in the full context of this entire part together. I really like how this part starts with the
Him talking about Twitter.
Yes, it's toxic. Good. But more importantly is the first shot, visual storytelling, Jesus, is that of that like little children's toy at the park. It's a horse. You know what I mean? And I feel like in terms of symbolism, it's like that four horsemen of the apocalypse. You know, the name that said on him was death. You know what I mean? And it, for me, in my analysis, is it's like you have the childlike toy at the park that is that horse. You know what I mean? But it's the evolution that Zack Snyder has been able to take this like property. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Something as childlike as like comic strips taken to this grand epic tale. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a real like it's a show of that in just one single frame. You know what I mean?
For sure. And I think on Steppenwolf, we have a wonderful dichotomy between Steppenwolf and Batman that is just the absolute, like...
Right here in the notes. I was on there. You got it, Jesus.
This is what I've been waiting since the prologue to talk about this.
Yeah.
I absolutely adore that Batman's whole story is one of redeeming himself after having failed and betrayed Superman.
Yep.
And similarly, that is Steppenwolf's motivation. Desaad tells him, like, you know, you betrayed him and, you know, you led a revolt or whatever. And like, and he lives with that guilt and he wants to prove himself the same way that Batman lives with his guilt.
And that story is seen in the prologue. That it visually is told in the prologue. You just don't know it yet because it's leading to what we're seeing right now. And Steppenwolf has as much dimension and layers as anyone from Game of Thrones. You know what I mean? That Kingslayer, that everyone has that like that mistake they made. And in terms of this movie, he is a perfect moral inversion of Bruce. And in speaking of redemption, it's that higher power. You know what I mean? It's like everything that Bruce is doing in this movie is for Superman. I made a promise to him on his grave. You know what I mean? Steppenwolf, in his glory, I'm doing this for him. I need that forgiveness. You know what I mean? And it's just, that is why I'm prepared to say it. Steppenwolf, greater than Thanos. You have urgency. You have stakes. At the beginning of Infinity War, I keep going back to Infinity War, it's like, okay, Thanos is like a dark Jor-El. He wants to, save the universe from impending doom, his home planet from impending doom, and he can't. So, like, what would Jor-El do if he survived and, didn't want that to happen? Any other planet, he would destroy half. It's a dark version of that. But the immediate story of Steppenwolf and his urgency to get those mother boxes, to take this Earth, to prove himself of the 50,000 worlds to Darkseid. You know what I mean?
Yep, I know what you mean. Now, here, do you know what this is? This is the weak sauce, all right?
It's cherry.
Tell me, is he better than Lex Luthor? Is he a better villain? Thanos, that was like baby's first step. Of course he was better than Thanos.
That was so much coming that I thought was going on that I ignored you. I was like, stick to the notes. Jesus,
look, I understand. You don't understand Rian Johnson references. I get it. You're not a true fan. There's nothing wrong with that.
I know the coming reference.
Yeah. The point being, you're hitting me with the weak sauce, brother. Thanos, baby shit. Is he the best villain of the DCEU? That's the real question.
And that's the thing where many moons of analysis of these movies will have to be done to really compare Lex and Steppenwolf. But in terms of just analyzing this movie, it really works as that dark inversion. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. That tying of your protagonist and your antagonist as truly seeking the same goal is what makes them such compelling characters in this film, and really like lifts them above, you know, everyone else around them.
And moving on from Steppenwolf to what we were talking about earlier with, you know, the one shutting him off from society, Cyborg again. I absolutely love the contrast in how Cyborg views his dad versus the idolization that Clark and Bruce have. You know what I mean? This motherfucker just has so much built-in like anger towards his dad. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And it's so radically different from what we've seen with, you know, in the past DC movies. Like, you know, Wonder Woman loves her mother. Bruce, you know, idolizes what Thomas Wayne stood for. Jor-El, Pa Kent, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this, and we see more diversion from that in this movie with Aquaman as well, where that bitterness towards his mother, you know
Yep.
what I mean? But right now, great lines of him trying to warn his son, because that's a lot of what Silas is in this movie, is trying to like redeem himself with his son, right? And not being able to. So when he's warning him of the monster, and Victor replies about him knowing a lot about monsters, and especially how to make them, and the way the camera is real good shit.
And I think the cool thing about Silas as a character is that it feels like his primary goal isn't saving his relationship with his son, but more so just keeping him safe. You know, he's not so much trying to restore the relationship that they could have, so much as like telling him like, you know, there's these things and they're coming for what you have. Here are the things that you can do. You know, like these moments, like they really show you that like first and foremost is his son's safety.
Yeah, he needs to. He will do anything at all costs to, you know, like save Cyborg, right? And much like with Volko, and we'll see later with Barry's dad, Silas is doing everything in his power to, you know, do better for Victor. You know what I mean? Him like him trying to like connect with his son again and save that like connection is so that he can pass on this information, because Silas has the information far beyond what Victor has concerning what his abilities are. But that means nothing if he can't connect with him. You know what I mean? And moving on from that is the build up to Darkseid in this.
Yep.
The gradual Steppenwolf's perspective enlightens us on the greater threat, Superman. If Steppenwolf is the counterpart to Batman, you have Darkseid is the counterpart to Superman. And every moment of this part of the movie is building to Darkseid's reveal as he finds the anti-life equation. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. And I gotta say, the moment where Diana finds that ancient like painting of Darkseid is like some of the most cathartic shit in this movie. Like we've heard of him in passing, his name never uttered, only Steppenwolf calling him like his glory, his master.
Yeah.
And if Steppenwolf, the man who like beat the Amazonians back almost single-handedly, is calling someone else his master, like what does that say?
We're getting to the motherfucking power scaling. You know what I mean? Like, you have to wonder to yourself, if this is what Steppenwolf can do, destroy hundreds of Wonder Womans at once, what can Darkseid do? You know what I mean? And that's the power of building up to the history lesson. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this history lesson is probably the culmination of the message of the movie of the unity versus conquering. You know what I mean? The nature of conformity. You know what I mean? And this is where all the movies started like tying together, where Krypton was a society where you were just shaft into positions. You know what I mean? And if you identified to something else and you wanted to, you know, express yourself out of that, you couldn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that was the importance of having the natural birth of Kal-El, was to like give him the choice of what he could be. You know what I mean? And that you know, that idea transcends from Man of Steel to Batman versus Superman to Justice League. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's all been building to Darkseid, which is the inversion of that, right? It is the enslavement. It is the conquering. It is everyone is unified under one glorious belief that is just Darkseid.
Yeah, it's kind of it's kind of amazing because when you look at it, this movie really is all about unity in both directions.
Right.
It's the unity of like all these people who are all separate but stronger together, coming together.
Right.
Right. Like, both in the
Diversity
forms-
is their strength.
Yeah.
Versus just like hive mind.
Yeah, it's like this hive mind collective. Like
Yeah.
the fact that the mother box is being brought together, being called the Unity, probably isn't like it's not like just like a frivolous thing. It's probably directly baked into the theme.
Right. Yeah.
Because the whole point of Batman's arc is bringing together
Us united.
Yes, exactly.
United unity. I like it.
Exactly.
I
like,
mean, people
it's
who
his
don't
whole-
get this like deep level shit with Zack Snyder is like how like
and like
it's
so
not buried.
it's kind of like both the protagonist and the antagonist are trying to bring together elements of their army or their collective power. So Batman's trying to unite like the Six with his army of like heroes.
Yeah.
And he's trying to unite the mother boxes to bring about the ultimate unity, you know, which is like the enslavement of everyone on Earth.
It's. I wonder, Jesus. Let me bring this. Let me speak this truth to you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Zack Snyder, big Rick and Morty stan.
Wow,
Enormous. I wonder how much because he listed Rick and Morty as one of his inspirations as a filmmaker, and I wonder how much of that episode about unity. You know what I mean? What is if everyone is like unified under like one person and there's no free will, you know what I mean? There's a lot of that in this movie. Let me just go down suggestively to this area and stop the ringing. The bell needs to be unrung.
there's our thumbnail.
Okay. But you see what I mean?
Yeah,
I mean, I was
yeah.
talking about Rick and Morty, and that happened. It was pretty serendipitous. But yeah, it's a perfect correlation between the Rick and Morty. I mean, everything I'm saying right now about Zack Snyder's Justice League could also be said about that episode of
Rick and Morty.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of it's interesting too because Rick and Morty, that Unity episode is kind of like the argument for Darkseid's plan, were Darkseid something more of a relatively benevolent or even compassionate like overlord, you know?
Yeah.
Because Unity, like when they are free from Unity's control, they are in like race wars, like this like species of aliens.
Well, yeah, I mean, but
are
that,
like
right. That's
constantly
I mean,
fighting.
that's when you ask about is Steppenwolf better than Lex. You've got to like really understand all the deep complexities of Steppenwolf's position, right? Because when Steppenwolf comes to Earth and he sees a primitive species at war with itself, too weak to stand as one, race wars, all that shit. I mean, what is the harm in getting rid of like racism and division if under the unity? You know what I mean? It's brutal from Batman's perspective, but it's it's a really deep villain from its perspective. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like this idea of like bringing everyone together. We intrinsically, generally, we push against that because we value so heavily our ability of free will, and that's something that like is very baked into this like franchise or whatever, right? You know, all the way back from like Man of Steel, like that was the whole point of Kal-El.
Well, because Kal-El and the House of El is of hope, so you have to gravitate towards if everyone has free will, they all have the potential to be a force for good. You know what I mean? So you have to be in that position from the House of El position. You know what I mean?
But like Steppenwolf, he comes in and it's like, yeah, like you can kind of this idea of like serving under Darkseid because the alternative is like this division that just harms humanity. Like that's a reasonable motivation for this character. I can understand why he does what he does. And further on that, when you look into the complexities of his character, his motivations become even more clear.
Yeah.
You know, like trying to earn the favor of the person that he clearly like admires and adores working under so much.
Absolutely. But I think I mean that unity was the culmination of this part, and I think we're ready to go into part 3.
Almost like a premonition. I think there's an attack coming.
My lord.